And we can expect the warm weather to continue with temperatures in the upper 70s and lower 80s for the next 5 days and beyond. So make sure you keep that champagne extra chilled for your New Year's parties because it is going to be a hot new year here in Phoenix.
Come outside. I'm outside. I'm outside. Whoa.
It's so cold.
How is this not melted yet? Yeah, it's not supposed to be cold, honey.
Yeah, don't touch them. Hey, I said don't touch them.
Come on, sweetheart. It's only snow. It's not going to hurt them.
You didn't do this?
No, I swear.
Okay, well then I don't want them touching them, and I want to know where these came from. You guys, Amelia, Daniel, come on, back in, please.
No one knew how they got there. Snowmen in the middle of the Arizona desert. That was the first event that I reported on. And I discovered that there were other events like it all over the country, all involving the same man, a man who's fulfilled seemingly impossible Christmas wishes.
And in our final story tonight, we have what appears to be something of a Christmas miracle. Snowmen here in Arizona. Our own Kristen Hendricks was on the scene in Glendale, and she's standing there live now. Kristen?
Chuck, residents in this Glendale community called our News 8 Newsline to report an extraordinary sight in the backyard of this house right here behind me. This was the sight that greeted the Lara family when they woke up this Christmas morning. Their backyard filled with snow, transformed into a winter wonderland populated by a dozen snowmen. The father of the family, Gabriel Lara, filmed it on his cell phone, seen here.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be cold, honey.
Amelia, don't touch them.
The Snowmen in the Desert piece became one of the biggest stories we ever did. It generated a ton of interest after our broadcast. My beat is covering local interest stories, and this was a great local interest story because everyone wanted to know how they got there. Most of them have melted away now, like this one here. But all of Glendale is still asking, who did this and why? You're sure this wasn't your doing?
No. We're all kind of shocked by all this. I mean, it's amazing, you know? The kids love it for sure, but no, we have no idea where they came from.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but he was just as surprised as I was. So we really want to know who did this so we can thank them, but also just, know how they got here.
So far, the only explanation for how the snowmen got here comes from the Lara family's youngest member. Do you know who put them here? Who made the snowmen?
Santa made them. He brought them for me. I wrote him.
Chuck, the questions remain. How did a dozen snowmen come to be standing in the backyard of this house? Who did it and why? Back to you.
It seems like we have a real Christmas mystery on our hands. Thank you, Kristen. Well, that's going to do it for us. On behalf of the entire News 8 family...
In the days after that report, the Newsline was flooded with calls, with inquiries about the story. Everyone in Phoenix wanted to know who made the snowmen in the desert. Was it some benevolent prankster? Were the parents actually behind it? We didn't have any leads. Until we got a call from a woman who said she knew who did it. She knew his name. So I went out to meet her, to interview her.
Yes, please.
Okay. Is my hair all right?
Your hair is beautiful. Yes. Which we taped in case we wanted to do a follow-up story on the snowman mystery. Okay, so Margaret, tell me about the man you think is behind the big snowman mystery.
I met Luke at the post office in the Letters to Santa program. We had such a great time reading the children's letters and matching them up with the toys we were donating. I'm sure he got that snowman letter from the little girl. I know because I'm the one that gave it to him. More presents than my brother. I was reading the letters, and this poor little girl, she wanted a real snowman at Christmas time. Would you please bring me a real live snowman? It never snows in Phoenix. I'm afraid I will never see one. So I'm laughing and reading the letter, and Luke was asking what I was laughing about, and I showed him. Isn't that adorable? That letter put the biggest smile on Luke's face. You know, when I saw it on the news report, I waited a few days, and that's when I called the station. I thought maybe you could help me locate him. I didn't have an address for him or a number. I just would really like to thank him. This was my first year volunteering, and Luke, he really helped me get my Christmas spirit back this year. It's just me nowadays, and I wanted to feel some Christmas joy again, like I used to when I was a little girl. I mean, I haven't bothered putting up a Christmas tree in years. Luke had said you can't have Christmas spirit unless you have a Christmas tree, so I took his advice. And when I got back, I saw that there was something waiting at the front door. The note wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. This is what was in the package. It's like the one my mother used to have. A Christmas tree topper like the one I had when I was a little girl. I'd lost it in a move years ago. I thought maybe he'd found one just like it. Except this isn't just like it. Do you see that crack? That's from where I dropped it when I was a little girl. I tried to put it up on top of the tree by myself, and I dropped it, and it broke. And my mom glued it back together and said, it was okay, it wasn't broken, it just made it unique. It made it more ours. This isn't just like my mom's Christmas tree topper, it's the exact same one. I don't think I ever told anyone about it. I mean, the movers looked for it for me. I don't know how he found it, but he did.
This wasn't like the snowman. This wasn't a public spectacle. This was private. Something deeply meaningful to Margaret Burke. And even more than the snowman, a mystery in terms of how he did it. So I tried tracking him down through the Phoenix post office where they volunteered in the Letters to Santa program. I knew the program. I was actually a participant in it. It started in New York where I grew up. It's called Operation Santa there, but it's the same thing. It's part of the same program. And I remember in second grade, we all wrote letters to Santa for a school project. And I remember we hand-carried our letters down to the old 8th Avenue post office where the program was founded and sending in my letter. And I remember exactly what I asked him for and that I didn't get it. What I didn't know then was that the post office gets millions of letters to Santa every year. And so what they try to do is help him. The postal workers read the letters and try to identify kids with special requests or kids in need. And then volunteers get those letters and they try to fulfill some of their Christmas wishes. The post office started the program in 1912, and as I found out, it's still in operation to this day across the country. So I checked with the post office. The Luke that Margaret had met, his full name was Lucas Nast. I wanted to find out more about him. You know, this mysterious do-gooder. You know, why was this guy going around performing these random acts of kindness, if that's what they were? There was no local address for him in Phoenix, so I ran the name, did a background check, got a few hits, and I discovered this wasn't just a local story. In 2006, there was a Lucas Nast who received a citation as the only volunteer in the Letters to Santa program in Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost post office in the United States. He was photographed with the postmaster in Barrow getting his award, and you can tell from the picture that it's the same man who was here in Phoenix. The only employment records attached to the name Lucas Nast were from stints as a seasonal worker at Gimbel's, the old New York department store. There were several W-2s available for the years 1981 to 1985, and an old temp ID badge turned up in Gimbel's employment archives. It's the same man, the same name, the same Lucas Nast. The same Lucas Nast who appeared in a chapter of the Letters to Santa program in Sarasota, Florida. I found him in a group photograph in a newspaper article about the program. An article that ran in the local paper in 1979. And granted, the newsprint was old, but you look at that picture and you look at Margaret Burke's volunteer photo that was taken more than 30 years later, and he doesn't seem to have aged a day. So I'm thinking then, you know, is this really the same guy, or is this, I don't know, some sort of weird case of identity theft? Because the one other place where the name Lucas Nast cropped up last year, around the same time he was volunteering in Phoenix in the Letters to Santa program, Lucas Nast was wanted in connection to a police matter in Maine. Lucas Nast was a person of interest in the illegal transport of a controlled species, reindeer. He was being sought for questioning in the unlawful transportation of a group of reindeer. I had a name, Lucas Nast, and a pair of remarkable feats ascribed to him.
You didn't do this?
No, I swear.
I don't know how he found it, but he did.
And a history that I suppose could best be described as checkered. On the one hand, he seemed a model citizen, volunteering in various Letters to Santa programs across the country for over 30 years. On the other hand, he was suspected of a federal offense in the state of Maine, and he was seemingly a fugitive from the law because no one could find him. Lucas Nast managed to evade the authorities in Maine, but it wasn't until I went there that I got the full story why the authorities wanted to question him. Officer Baker, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to talk with me a little bit about what happened. Let's just start at the beginning.
Yes, ma'am. It was Christmas morning last year. Christmas is not as quiet as you might think. Most poachers think that they will catch us snoozing so they can bag a couple deer without proper tags when they think we're not looking. We are. I was on duty that morning. I was here at dispatch. Fish and Wildlife, is Officer Baker speaking. All of a sudden, the calls start coming in pretty quick. 5 or 6 within 20 minutes. Please hold. Maine Fish and Wildlife, is Officer Baker speaking. Yeah, all right. Merry Christmas to you, too. All right. Can I put you on hold, man? Yeah. Maine Fish and Wildlife, is Officer Baker speaking. All from Waterville, from folks who are claiming to see reindeer in their yards. Okay, but please hold. I'm thinking that perhaps the folks in Waterville had a bit too much Christmas spirit the night before if they think they're seeing reindeer.
What do you think they were seeing?
I assumed it was a herd of white-tailed deer, maybe a group of moose. They don't usually congregate, but maybe. But then I get another call, again from Waterville. And this guy is swearing up and down that his daughter is filming a herd of reindeer in his yard. Okay, what's your address? So I figure I gotta put an end to this nonsense. On my break, I go down to Waterville to look at the video.
Whoa!
I can't believe it. There's no question. They're reindeer. So, called all the zoos, all accounted for, no reindeer missing. So, where'd they come from? I mean, because reindeer, they do not live in Maine. I mean, maybe a herd migrated down from Canada, but it's a rather long distance to migrate. Reindeer actually live closer to the Arctic Circle than they do the Maine border. So I followed the tracks. I followed them for 50 yards or so.
Hi.
But then they stopped.
What do you mean?
I mean, they disappeared. So I go around the neighborhood. I start asking people if they've seen anything unusual the evening before. Some folks had seen the reindeer, but none of them saw what happened to them. No one saw anyone transporting them in or out of the area. In fact, most folks, when I asked them if they'd seen anything unusual Christmas Eve night, assumed that I was asking about the meteors from that particular evening. Apparently, another gentleman had been through the neighborhood that morning, asking about the large meteor shower that occurred in the area.
The Geminids. I read about them.
The Geminids. That's correct. It was a pretty active Christmas morning for folks from these parts. Hope we didn't interrupt too many kiddies unwrapping their presents. Me with my questions about reindeer and this other gentleman with his questions about meteors.
The Geminids are an annually occurring meteor shower. The lights display associated with the Geminids is so spectacular, some people call it nature's natural fireworks show. They can be seen practically anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere on clear nights, every December, but never after December 17th. The Geminids travel in a very predictable path. They're far beyond Earth's orbit after December 17th. You can't see them anymore after that. That's what's peculiar about the National Weather Service's conclusion. What was visible in the skies above Maine Christmas Eve night came 1 week too late to be the Geminids.
What interested me was the girl's story, Daphne. Not so much who she thought was responsible for the reindeer, but how they got there. What you filmed was pretty incredible, Daphne. Now, when I talked to your mom over the phone, she said you might have some idea where the reindeer came from?
There is reindeer. I wrote him a letter and I asked to see them. And he brought them.
She wrote a letter to Santa. And she got a big answer. And as she's describing what she filmed from her kitchen window, this magical experience, her joy with her parents, I envied her. My parents passed when I was pretty young. And in my letter to Santa, when I was an 8-year-old girl, I asked him to bring them back, which was impossible, but so was this. How did she get what she asked for, and how was Lucas Nast involved?
Nobody knows what happened to those reindeer, what happened to them or how they got there. And, I mean, those tracks just disappeared. I mean, there weren't even impressions of tracks any further in the yard. It hadn't snowed that day, but there was a bit of a wind, so must have been a mighty big spindrift covered them up. It's the only possible explanation. A few days later, we got a tip from the local police department. There was a gentleman named Lucas Nast, who apparently could give us information about what happened to those reindeer.
Lucas Nast, and another letter to Santa with a seemingly impossible wish that he apparently and remarkably fulfilled. Waterville is a small town in south central Maine. They don't have a Letters to Santa program, but there was one in Portland. It didn't seem possible that he'd have been a volunteer there, too. Not when he was a volunteer in Phoenix during that same time, but I had to check the lead, and he was there. The snowmen in the desert, the reindeer in the yard. This was somebody doing these wonderful things for other people and making it look like a mystery. I thought these incidents were sort of like a Good Samaritan's version of crop circles. You know, those huge designs found in fields that people thought were the work of aliens, but it turned out to be a hoax. Something made to look like a mystery that had an earthly explanation. I thought that's what this was. At the same time Lucas Nast was a volunteer in the Phoenix, Arizona Letters to Santa program, I found out he was also a volunteer in the Letters to Santa program in Portland, Maine. Eventually, I located a volunteer who claimed to have met Lucas Nast at the Portland chapter of Letters to Santa, who was more than willing to speak to me. So we taped another interview, and after I met Dennis Osborne, I didn't know what to think. Lucas Nast, what can you tell me about him?
Lucas Nast. We met Lucas last year down at the Letters to Santa program at the post office. Mrs. and I go down every year, try to do what we can to fill some stockings of some deserving kids. We've been doing them for more than 20 years. Never had kids of our own, so it feels good to do it. Kids in the Letters to Santa program, they are kids. Lucas was new to town. Said he'd volunteered in Letters to Santa programs all over the country. Said he was in shipping or some such, you know, so he traveled a fair bit.
Hey. Did he say where he was from originally?
Never did say. We all got on so well right from the get-go. I just thought of him as one of us, you know, true Mainer. Had the same values, same sense of humor, same, fondness for facial hair. Mary Ellen, my wife, she would tease us about the fact that we needed to update our style into the 21st century. They have a photo hanging in the post office lobby of the founding fathers of the Letters to Santa program from 100 years ago, from the inauguration of the program. She said we would have fit right in. Oh, we all had a lot of laughs. Luke had some great stories of letters he'd gotten over the years, you know, some of the things these kids asked for. And some of the things they confess to, you know, trying to come clean and get on a nice list and get the toys. And, yeah, some of the letters really stick with you.
Did any particular letter stick with you?
There was this girl several years ago, and we adopted her letter every year for 7 years. Her name was Lucy, and Lucy always asked for music every year. My wife loves music. You know? She was the music instructor at the elementary school. And she always got Lucy the stuff the kids liked. And every year, Lucy would write another letter to Santa and start by thanking him for the beautiful music. Yeah?
You are the best! Exclamation mark. I love my music collection. I listen to it every day. All I want for Christmas is more music forever. I hope you have a great Christmas. Love, Lucy.
All my friends want to borrow music from me. That's our girl. We always wanted to meet Lucy. Never did really know anything about her, what her circumstances were. We only ever knew her first name. You read the letters, but the addresses or last names, anything to identify the kids, the post office blacks out. I think that's your favorite present. Even more favorite. After 7 years, there were no more letters from Lucy. I'm sure she got too old to keep writing letters to Santa. Mary Ellen has kept every one of those letters. And after that, for many years, at Christmas time, Mary Ellen would remember Lucy and hope that wherever she was, she had some beautiful music. You know, Luke got all choked up when I told him that story, too. A couple of old sad sacks, we gotta remember why we're here. Hey, here. This girl says, "Dear Santa, for Christmas this year, I would like to see your reindeer." And I said, "Come on, help me with this girl. She's asking to see Santa's reindeer." He said, "We figure something out."
What do you think he meant by that?
Well, yeah, I figured he was thinking reindeer stuffed animal or tickets to the zoo. But apparently that's not what he had in mind. Mary Ellen and I read that the authorities were investigating the incident and who was behind it, so I went down to the police station to try and clear things up, you know, let them know that Luke was just trying to make a kid's Christmas wish come true. I hope it didn't make matters worse for him, especially after what he did for us.
He did something for you?
Yeah, see, this past Christmas Eve, we had carolers come to our house. And we live on a rural route, so we never have carolers. And this was a whole children's choir.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas.
It's okay.
And a Happy New Year. Good tidings we bring to you and your kids. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Mary Ellen and I saw that the choir director was crying. We thought it was because she was listening to such beautiful music, but then she introduced herself.
I just wanted to say thank you. My name is Lucy. Oh, you...
It was Lucy. And she thanked us for all the Christmas presents she got every year for 7 years that fostered her love of music.
How do you think she found you?
Well, the kids, you know, they never know who the volunteers are that get them their gifts. But I asked her, "How'd you find us?" And she said she got a letter that suggested she bring a choir to our place. And the letter identified who we were, but it was anonymous, you know, unsigned. Had to be him. I have no idea on earth how he did it, but Luke, you know, Luke brought it to us. And Mary Ellen and I were very touched and very grateful for what he did for us. And it's even gotten Mary Ellen a new job. You know, she's sorry she can't be here, but she's out of retirement. She's helping direct the choir with Lucy.
Here was another connection through the Letters to Santa program. And again, Lucas Nast doing something exceptionally kind on behalf of other people. You read about long-lost relatives being reunited all the time, but this was different. They didn't find one another. Lucas Nast put them together. He helped them find one another. But I couldn't find him. I couldn't find him to ask him how he was doing this and why. And that was it. That's everything I could find on Lucas Nast. His name didn't appear anywhere else, but his picture did. I found him under a different alias. The same guy, the man I'd known as Lucas Nast, had performed an even more incredible act of kindness. I had a new lead with a new name. Lucas Nast. Who was he? Was he some kind of strange identity thief who doesn't steal but gives stuff away under different aliases? I wondered if he might be one of those anonymous benefactors you hear about, like the mystery tipper, the person who traveled all over the country, leaving extremely generous tips that changed people's lives.
Around the world, someone has been giving out huge tips. I'm not talking a couple of $100s. This tip was $5,000 in Connecticut.
Or the hidden cash millionaire, the guy who put on massive scavenger hunts for people to find his money.
What began as a scavenger hunt,
oh my God, we gotta go. Oh,
may now be a movement.
I wondered if the man I was looking for was like them.
There really is no agenda here, he writes online, other than bringing people together in a positive way.
Gosh, I'm just so excited and so happy.
The man I was looking for, Lucas Nast, what did I know about him? I had a few photographs of him over the years. I had his old ID badge and some old employment records. I'd connected him to a long history all across the country with the Letters to Santa program. And he had a history of performing, I'm not sure that I would have called them miracles, but I thought somebody else might. And somebody else did. With the few photographs I had of him, I tried searching for him another way with image recognition online. And using a few keywords like Christmas and reindeer, things I knew he'd been linked to, I added another word, miracle, and I found him again. It was the same man, but under a different name. This man called himself Nick Mira, Nicholas Mira. He was a pilot who'd flown a soldier back home to be with her family for Christmas. And the plane that he flew, that plane had been the subject of a lot of attention and a lot of speculation. Last Christmas Eve, a plane registered to Nicholas Mira flew into Duluth, Minnesota. That's where he landed, but there were unidentified lights associated with his aircraft, lights that were seen by dozens of people in a trail that stretched across 3 states. So I went to Duluth to talk to the air traffic controller on duty that night. I wanted to know more about that flight.
Okay, so you want to know about the last flight that came in on Christmas Eve night. Nick Mira's plane.
You know him?
Well, it was a quiet night. We got a little chatty on the radio.
Okay, FLI 9er RNDR, you are cleared for landing. Roger that, Tower. Have a Merry Christmas, Gus. Copy that, and a very Merry Christmas to you, Nick.
He was a real nice guy.
You've seen the eyewitness videos of the flight and the unusual lights surrounding the plane.
That was St. Elmo's fire. The National Weather Service determined that's what that was. It's not uncommon. People see St. Elmo's fire around the wings of a plane or the nose of a plane all the time. So I'm still not sure what all the hoopla is about. You could have saved yourself a trip. You and that astronomer fella.
I'm sorry?
The astronomer, the one who came up here asking about the plane, too.
St. Elmo's fire is similar to lightning. It occurs when there's excess geomagnetic energy in the atmosphere. It flashes and glows for a few seconds and usually has a sort of ghostly blue fire, hence the name. It occurs on the tips of structures, usually, a ship's mast, for example, or along an airplane's wings. But that's not what the eyewitnesses who reported the incident claimed that they saw. What they saw didn't flash for just a few seconds. What they reported, and what some of them recorded, was a continuous light, a steady glow that traveled hundreds of miles. I know what the National Weather Service claimed this was, but this was not St. Elmo's fire. This was something else.
You know, the only extraordinary thing that happened that night was the story of the soldier on that plane. Now, that was something worth all the media attention.
A soldier from right here in Duluth who'd been on tour in Afghanistan was able to make it home to her kids in time for Christmas morning. You can see the home video footage here of Corporal Nancy Cameron.
That soldier, Corporal Nancy Cameron, she's the one who posted her family photo with him, with Nicholas Mira. I couldn't find him, but I was able to find her. There were multiple videos capturing the lights that enveloped Nicholas Mira's plane that night. The videos shot by eyewitnesses on the ground are all consistent. They show a uniform wave of light moving across the sky. But there's one video that's very different. It wasn't shot from the ground. It was shot from the air.
There it is again.
It was shot by a passenger on another plane that crossed flight paths with the plane Nicholas Mira was piloting.
Ma'am, I would appreciate if you could go ask the pilot if that's okay. At least let him know. Not crazy. I'm concerned about it.
Sir, I'm going to ask you again to turn off.
Don't tell me to calm down. There's a plane. It is.
I had to know if the passenger on Nicholas Mira's plane, if Corporal Nancy Cameron saw up close what seemed to be captured in that video.
There it is again.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to turn off your phone. Please calm down.
Calm down, what? Is it not something to be concerned about? Ma'am, I would appreciate if you could go ask the pilot if that's okay. At least let him know. Not crazy. I'm concerned about it.
Sir, I'm going to ask you again to turn off.
Don't tell me to calm down. There's a plane. It is.
The silhouette, the lights. The National Weather Service tells us that what the eyewitnesses reported was just an optical illusion, that they were imagining what they were seeing. But if this was just a giant Rorschach test in the sky and people were just projecting their imaginations onto what they were seeing, then everyone was imagining the same thing. I needed to know what Corporal Nancy Cameron saw, if she saw up close what seemed to be captured in that video, because what was captured in that video was Nicholas Mira's plane, and Nancy Cameron was on that plane. I tried tracking down Nicholas Mira, no luck. After that flight, he disappeared. But I was able to track down Corporal Nancy Cameron, and I found out how she came to be on that plane.
I've been on tour for 2 years in Afghanistan. Being on a tour for 2 years, not seeing your family, not seeing your kids, it's incredibly hard. You don't see them. You don't hear them. You know, it's just the normal, everyday stuff. You miss those kinds of things. Holidays are the hardest, for sure. So I was excited to get my papers and fly out of Kabul on the 23rd because I'd have a chance to get home in time for Christmas.
How old are your children?
My boys are 6 and 8, and I was not going to miss this Christmas with them. I couldn't. I've missed too many already. The plane touched down in Chicago, and I jumped up out of my seat. I ran the entire length of the terminal. And I got there in time, but that's when I saw that the flight had been canceled. The plane had been grounded due to mechanical errors, and they weren't going to have another flight until the following day. So.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. My cell phone died, and I couldn't even call home to tell him that I wasn't going to make it. George came up and offered me his. Thanks.
No problem. You okay?
Yeah, thanks.
The first time I saw her, I remember how sad she looked when she used my phone, because she used it to call home and let her family know that she wasn't going to be making it home in time for Christmas.
Yeah, the flight has been canceled. No, but there's another flight in the morning. I know. Yeah, tell him I love him.
You know, it felt terrible for her. I mean, we did what we could to raise her spirits.
What did you do?
You know what? We're not going anywhere anytime soon, so let's make the best of it, huh? Let's go grab a bite to eat.
Yeah.
Okay?
Sure, thanks.
Well, we made the best out of the situation. Myself and a few of the passengers, we took her to dinner. We found a restaurant. It was the only place open in the entire airport.
We all went to the restaurant, and everyone was trying so hard to cheer me up, but I was so incredibly disappointed I wasn't getting it home.
And it was empty, completely, well, not completely empty. There was one guy sitting quietly in the back. He had a familiar look about him. I didn't know him, couldn't tell you why. He just looked familiar to me. Anyway, he must have overheard us, because out of nowhere, he stands up and he asks if he could give one of us a lift to Duluth.
I'm actually flying to Duluth. I've only got a cargo plane. I got room for one passenger.
No one could believe it. He was a cargo pilot, and he had a plane. But he could only take one of us. And I don't think he'd even gotten through his full offer to us when George stood up and said, "You should take her."
She should go, please.
Yeah?
Yes, take her. Go.
I'm leaving right now.
Are you sure?
Get out of here. Just leave her. Go.
That moment was overwhelming. It still is. And I know it probably sounds corny, but it was at that moment that I realized how proud I was to have served. So very proud and honored to have served for people like that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
There was no one that any of us wanted to see on that flight except for her.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's going home.
So I called Mike, that's my husband, and I told him to get the kids and meet me at the airport.
Go get Mom, go get Mom, go get Mom.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Now, Corporal Cameron, you must have heard the reports about the flight you were on and seen the videos of the lights surrounding the plane. Can you tell me what you saw from where you sat inside the plane?
Yeah, I've heard the reports and I've seen the videos. I don't remember a lot of it because I was asleep through most of it. I was just so jet lagged and I just kind of crashed. Actually felt really bad because here Nick was doing something incredibly kind and I couldn't even talk to him. But when I was awake, I didn't see anything like what was on that video. I can't explain it. You know, one of the ironies is that when I called back to tell my boys I'd be coming home for Christmas, I joked with them. I said, Santa's answering your letter. He's giving Mommy a ride home. Yeah. You know, with that beard and all, Nick, he just kind of looked the part.
Did you say that your kids wrote a letter to Santa?
Yeah, they did. They wished for me to come home. And they got their wish. So did I.
I was just wondering, you don't still have that letter, do you?
Yeah, it's still hanging up down at the post office. They've got a Support Our Troops mural.
Another Letters to Santa connection. Another wish fulfilled. And the same man. Lucas Nast, Nicholas Mira. I don't know what his real name was, but whoever he was at the center of it all. We found something else hanging in the Duluth post office. There was another display, this one a history of the Letters to Santa program, with the names of the men who founded the program in 1912. And one of the names was Lucas Nast. I just stared at the picture and thought, this can't be possible. But there he was, in a photograph that was taken more than 100 years ago. Lucas Nast, Nicholas Mira, who was this? I didn't know. But George Kalianis had his own theory.
I remember before they left, the pilot came up to me and said, for your generous heart, I say, Evcharisto. That's thank you in Greek.
You're Greek. I'm Greek. Where are you from?
My family's from Mira.
Mira. Mira, I had never heard of Mira. Well, he tells me his last name is from the city he was from. So, when I get home, I look it up on the computer and I see that Mira is an ancient Greek city in what's now present-day Turkey. Now, the city itself, Mira, it no longer exists, but pretty sure I know why he was familiar to me.
And why is that?
See, it turns out Mira's most famous resident was Nicholas of Mira, Saint Nicholas of Mira, patron saint of pilots, sailors, ships, and patron saint of children. Pilot? I know exactly who he was. He was Saint Nick.
Lucas Nast, Nicholas Mira. It was the same man. The same man in different locations at the same time. The same man appearing unchanged over different centuries. How is this possible? Was this possible? The images in the light. The silhouettes of reindeer.
Okay, FLI 9RNDR, you are cleared for landing.
The call sign on his plane, FLI 9RNDR. When you sound it out, it's Fly 9 Reindeer, the number of reindeer that pull his sleigh. This couldn't be possible. But I wasn't the only person who was seeing this. There was the eyewitness footage. And then there was George Kallianis's observation about St. Nicholas of Myra. St. Nicholas is most famously the patron saint of children, and he's the patron saint of something else. Families. He's the patron saint of bringing families together. And that's when I saw the pattern emerging.
This isn't just like my mom's Christmas tree topper, it's the exact same one.
It seemed to me, at least in part, that was what he was doing. This man I was looking for. Bringing people together. Whoever he was, whatever this was, I knew I needed to keep trying to find him because he was maybe the biggest human interest story in history. And I wasn't the only one onto him. The silhouettes in the lights, the National Weather Service, they claimed that it was just an optical illusion, but yeah, that explanation didn't satisfy me. And apparently, someone else wasn't completely satisfied with that explanation. There was an astronomer investigating the incident, the St. Elmo's fire incident in Duluth. I got his name from the air traffic controller. He was from the Flagstaff Observatory, right next door in Flagstaff, Arizona. And it occurred to me, the astronomer, I could place him in Maine, around the reindeer incident and the strange lights in the sky, and in Duluth, where again, there were strange lights. Messages earlier this week. We are doing some research here, but if you could please give me a call back, I'll just take a quick minute of your time to discuss some of the phenomena that you specialize in. Thank you. All right, bye-bye now. I called him I don't know how many times, left numerous messages about why I wanted to talk, and he never called me back. But I kept trying, and I kept digging. Digging into the one lead I had, the silhouettes, the lights. For months, I researched to see if there were any other similar incidents reported, any other lights in the sky reports made on Christmas Eve. I was shocked at what I discovered. There are more UFOs reported on Christmas Eve than any other night of the year, every single year. Reports of Christmas Eve UFO sightings, they date back as far as UFO records have been kept. Official, on the record. There was one incident in particular that caught my attention, that took place in 1979.
It's what you would expect to see on Christmas Eve. Families gathered together in the glow of Christmas lights. But the crowd gathered behind me have come outside not to admire the lights on the houses, but rather the lights in the sky. What we're seeing above us are the northern lights. They've never been seen in Sarasota or anywhere else in Florida for that matter. And according to the National Weather Service, this is the most southerly occurrence of the northern lights ever recorded.
And it wasn't just what was filmed, it was who.
Neil, you saw the lights and came outside to get a better look, is that right?
Yes.
And the neighbors say they came out because they heard you shouting something up at the sky, and that's what brought everyone out here.
It was Dr. Neil Duquesne. 35 years ago, the astronomer who was in Duluth before me and Maine.
Neil, can you tell me what it was you were shouting?
And even then, he wasn't big on talking to reporters.
Was it that you saw Santa Claus?
There he was, being interviewed about a Lights in the Sky episode that took place over his family home on Christmas Eve. He was involved. He was involved in all this, and I was going to find out how. So I called him one more time. I left one more message, and I asked him if he'd ever written a letter to Santa.
No one quite knows for sure why the northern lights have appeared in the South Florida sky, but maybe, just maybe, They followed old St. Nick all the way down from the North Pole.
I don't think it's that widely known that nearly 25% of all UFO reports occur on one night. Same night every year, Christmas Eve. Hundreds of reports, each and every year. And the federal government has no response to the correlation. And the National Weather Service has contrived explanations for each and every one of these reports. I know because it happened to me. The National Weather Service claimed that a solar flare had caused an unusually large geomagnetic storm in the North Pole, and that's why the northern lights were visible that night in Sarasota. But they failed to give an explanation why the lights appeared to be concentrated just over my house that night. I've been searching for a scientific explanation for what happened that night ever since.
He called me back. And when we finally spoke, he confirmed what I'd suspected. He had been involved in the Letters to Santa program. He wanted to know how I knew that, how I knew he'd written a letter to Santa when he was a kid. I told him I knew that because Lucas Nast was in Sarasota, Florida in 1979, volunteering in the local Letters to Santa program. Lucas Nast. He was in Sarasota, Florida in 1979, and so was Neil Duquesne.
Neil, can you tell me what it was you were shouting? Was it that you saw Santa Claus?
That's not what I shouted. When I ran out into the yard to look at the lights, I wasn't shouting that I had seen Santa Claus. I was shouting to thank him. When I was a boy, when I lost my mom, I was very young. My dad had a hard time of it. We both did. And Christmas was always the toughest time of the year in our house. You could tell our house was a sad home just by looking at it. All the other houses had lights, but ours, once my mom was gone, there wasn't any light in our house of any kind. And that's why I wrote the letter. And I asked for one thing: lights. And that Christmas Eve, we had the most spectacular lights I've ever seen. And I knew what they were. I didn't know what they were called then, but I knew what they were. I had this book as a kid. It's out of print now, but I still have it. It's called The Eskimo Glow. It's about a young Eskimo boy who gets lost out on the ice and finds his way home by following the lights. There on the snow, he stood all alone. The night pressing in, cold to the bone. The boy despaired, still far from home. But a little voice told him, "You're not all alone." "Look up," it said. "Look up in the sky. You'll see a green light shining down from on high. Follow that light that glows green on the frost. Follow that light. You'll no longer be lost." That's what the lights look like. Just like in the book. The book my mom used to read to me. They were the lights from this book.
Thank you.
I never told anyone about that letter. That was the moment I decided what I was going to be. I was going to follow the lights. Even after being an astronomer for almost 20 years, I can't explain what happened that night. No one can. I never told anyone about the letter. Till I told you.
He told me his story. He told me about his letter to Santa, and I caught myself, starting to believe this was possible, wanting to believe this was possible.
I don't know how he found it, but he did.
I have no idea on earth how he did it.
I went on to tell him about Lucas Nast and Nicholas Mira, and that there were others with similar experiences.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I wasn't the only person who had written a letter where something like this had happened. So now I was resolved to help figure it out with her, who this was, what this was.
We began working together to find him, pooling what information we had. We were hoping to connect Lucas Nast or Nicholas Mira to a place where any other lights in the sky incidents were reported last Christmas Eve. We were hoping any new information we had would ultimately lead us to him. There were hundreds of reports of lights in the sky made last Christmas Eve, so we started going through each case one by one. We cataloged the locations of all of them. Every now and then, we came across a promising lead. In Seattle, several reports of a swiftly moving light in the sky were made on the record. In one video capturing the event, there was an unusual but familiar image on the tape.
The official explanation given by the National Weather Service was that this was a weather balloon. Weather balloons don't fly against the wind.
Ultimately, we couldn't connect Lucas Nast or Nicholas Mira to the incident. We couldn't confirm he was present in the Seattle area last year. In a town in New York called White Plains, a kid captured what was explained away as ball lightning in the skies above his house.
A lot of the reported incidents are classified by the National Weather Service as ball lightning. It's a convenient explanation. Science doesn't really know how ball lightning works, so it can't be debunked.
Again, there was no indication that Lucas Nast or Nicholas Mira was in New York last year.
We kept going through every single lights in the sky incident reported last Christmas Eve. We weren't having any luck. We were mapping the events. There were no discernible patterns. We weren't making any connections until one reported incident caught Kristen's attention. A light was reported in the skies over Illinois. According to the National Weather Service, it was a comet that changed direction. Comets travel in a fixed orbit. They don't suddenly change directions, which means this was not a comet. With all the extraordinary things that we were seeing associated with these UFO reports, what was special about this one incident?
Comet. It's one of his reindeer. This guy, prankster, strange good Samaritan, supernatural being, whatever he was, he had given signs before. He had a sense of the theatrical, and he'd left calling cards before. I thought this was one of them, especially when I saw the video. We searched everywhere to find any sort of video capturing the comet event. News outlets, astronomy chat rooms. We even checked NASA's publicly available video of astronomical phenomena. We couldn't find anything until we came across an unusual home video. There was something captured last December 24th in Niles, Illinois. We could place Lucas Nast in Niles. Not for last Christmas, but for this Christmas. The police station there was holding a toy drive, their first annual Lucas Nast Holiday Toy Drive. We immediately went to Niles, to the police precinct. We needed to know how the toy drive got that name and if he was going to be there. What we never could have imagined is what was already waiting for us. What was waiting for me. There was something captured last December 24th in Niles, Illinois. We were able to place Lucas Nast in Niles, but not from last Christmas, for this Christmas. The police station there was holding a toy drive, their first annual Lucas Nast Holiday Toy Drive. When Neil and I got to Niles, we quickly found out how the toy drive got that name. Lucas Nast was there, in that building, last Christmas Eve.
What's your name?
My name is Kristen Hendricks. Thank you.
He was picked up peering through a residential window. Somebody saw him and called it in. He had a sack full of toys on him. He was brought in on suspicion of B&E, breaking and entering. When they pick him up, this guy's got no ID on him, no wallet. Says his name is Lucas Nast. We figured he's hitting the neighborhood while posing as Santa.
I was the first one to interview him. We ran him through the whole bit, confiscated his personal items. The only things he's got on him are some candy canes in one pocket and a letter in the other. And we took his sack of toys for potential evidence. No joke, that thing was so heavy it'd give you a hernia. We took his mugshot, took his prints. By the time I got to him, he was already in the holding cell. My job was to go in there and get him to fess up to where he got those presents from. I decided to take the direct route. I brought in one of the gifts with me. He started off a nice guy. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Wish me a Merry Christmas, but then he starts going on and on about how he's gonna be late delivering the toys, et cetera, and I'm thinking to myself, whoa, we got a true believer here. Hey, Kris Kringle, this is one of the gifts from out of your bag. If you didn't steal it, you should know what's inside. Without missing a beat, he says, why, they're building blocks, officer. He knew it was toy bricks, and I was careful not to shake the box when I brought it in. So I said, okay, tell me where you got it. And he said, from the North Pole. You wanna play around? Here, play with your toys. We can play all day. You're not going anywhere unless the charges are dropped.
He wasn't talking, so we had to sit tight. But we managed to get in touch with the homeowner. About an hour later, the owner of the house came in, and there was no sign of a break-in at his house. Nothing was missing, but something was left behind. The owner of the house, he came down wanting to thank him. Turns out Lucas Nast had left a dog at the doorstep as a gift. He put a tag on its collar with the address of the house and everything. He even knew what the kid wanted to name the dog. And the guy, the owner, he thought the dog must have come from the Letters of Santa program.
In the end, no charges were filed. Lucas Nass was free to go.
And we thought, you know, whatever's going on with this guy, he's pretty harmless. And maybe we shouldn't have leaned on him too much, you know, so.
I know, but I was in a bad mood last Christmas Eve, you know. Because of the toy drive. We have a toy drive every year, and last year we didn't even come close to hitting our goal. So I was feeling pretty bad that we were gonna be disappointing a lot of kids. But anyway, I did feel bad about being so tough on the guy, so I brought him some of my wife's cookies to let him know, you know, no hard feelings and Merry Christmas.
What the?
There.
I don't know where he got all those parts from. The box didn't have all those parts.
He built a building while he was in there, an exact replica of our precinct. I mean, this thing was a down-to-the-brick accurate. You know, you saw it.
Yeah, I don't know how long we stared at that thing. I remember at one point he asked me for a cookie. I handed one to him.
Chocolate peppermint. She made these last year.
I was so distracted looking at it that it didn't even hit me until later. You know, how did he know we had those cookies last year? How did he know that my wife made those cookies last year?
When the duty officer took him to begin the paperwork for his release, he told us we could keep the model of our police precinct.
Merry Christmas, gentlemen.
And said something about keeping up the good work we were doing for the kids. We were still just checking it out. It was just amazing. I mean, the replica, it had every single detail of our precinct. Even had the heating unit on the roof. You can't see that from the street. You can only see it from above.
From the air. He left a sleigh on the roof, and he had a little tiny sack of toys underneath. It looked exactly like the sack of toys he came in with.
We both knew what we were thinking. He'd been on the roof.
Yeah, and there's no external access to the roof.
No way!
The internal stairway is restricted. He couldn't have gotten up there through the building. Without that gift of toys, we weren't gonna have enough for the kids.
But the replica of the police station, that became a big story locally.
But the gifts he left,
This is unbelievable. Look at this.
that was why we named the toy drive after him.
So to get back to your original question, he left that night without picking up any of his personal effects.
My name is Kristen Hendricks.
Would you mind coming with us, please?
Sure.
We never imagined anyone would ever come in with her name asking about him. I can't believe it.
Detectives, this is what you asked for. You can just sign it out.
This is Lucas Nass property. We left it here.
Lucas Nass left this here.
Yes, last year.
Lucas Nast left that envelope almost a full year before I came to the police station. Before I even knew his name. Before I even knew I was trying to find him.
Sure. She gonna be all right?
She just needs some time to process everything. All this.
Lucas Nast left that envelope almost a full year before I came to the police station. Before I even knew his name. Before I even knew I was trying to find him. Is it okay if I sit down?
Sure.
In the envelope was a letter written on construction paper in crayon. I knew it because I wrote it. It's the letter I wrote to Santa 29 years ago. Dear Santa, I want to meet you because I know the Santa at the store is not really you. I want to believe you are real. If you are, and if you read this letter, all I want for Christmas is my parents. And if you bring them back, I will get you anything you want for Christmas. Love, Kristen. And he wrote me a letter back. My dear Kristen, the enclosed is not really mine to give. It belongs to you. There was a photo inside. My parents used to take me to Gimbel's, the old New York department store, every Christmas time to see Santa. One of the hits I got when I first started looking, he was a seasonal worker at Gimbel's. Lucas Nast was there. I wanted to meet him, and I already had. My parents passed away barely a year after this picture was taken. I didn't have any pictures of them, of me with them from Christmas. Now I do. I was in a state of shock at the police station after opening his letter, so it wasn't until I got back home that I went through the Niles police file on him, and I saw the booking photo of him. And that's when I finally allowed myself to see it, his name. He had a middle initial. That's when I saw who Lucas A. Nast really was. There was something else in the letter he wrote me. He reminded me that I wrote that I would get him anything he wanted for Christmas, if he brought me my parents. So he told me what he wanted. As for what I want for Christmas, I want you to always be surrounded by friends and family, where there is goodness and kindness and love. That is where you'll find me. He was right. That's where I found him. And I believe